I was born a woman. That's what they often say.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm saying is, no one was born anything.
A guy who is born a guy who gravitates towards male activities, likes females, all those things, by saying that that's a man, that this is a born man, and you're saying no one is.
So if you're saying if those characteristics are naturally determined, then all of us guys who don't do those things are unnatural.
A professor sat across from Joe Rogan and calmly declared, "No one is born anything. Not a man, not a woman, not even human in the sense we think of. Just nothing." The claim wasn't just bold, it was baffling. And within seconds, Rogan dismantled it with plain common sense.
You've heard a lot of trans people say this, right? I was born a woman. That's what they often say.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm saying is, no one was born anything.
What? You're losing me in a huge way.
Why?
You don't think that some women are born women and you don't think you're born a man?
No.
What are you born? Why are you a man?
For all sorts of reasons.
For all sorts of reasons.
Yeah.
None of them being
Well,
biological.
we just decided.
None of them being the XY chromosome. None of them being you have testicles. None of them being you have a penis. None of them being the fact that you generally gravitate towards male activities like boxing, kickboxing, aggressive things.
We just went through this whole thing.
No, you didn't.
What followed was a conversation that revealed the power of clarity against overcomplication, and why millions of viewers saw the professor's theories crumble under the weight of everyday reality.
Prior to the 1960s and 70s, it was the dominant belief that if you were born a woman, you were going to be a wife and a mother. And if you weren't, you were doing something unnatural, right? That if you were black, you could never be the head of a business or the president. If you were born with a penis, you're a man and you should do X, Y, and Z with your life, right? The trans movement needed postmodernism to make that intervention and say, no, that's not true, right? You can actually be a woman because woman is an invention. It's a social construct.
But let's take it step by step, because the deeper this exchange went, the more tangled the professor's argument became, and the more effortlessly Rogan exposed it. The professor began with a sweeping statement about history. He painted a picture of a world where categories like man and woman didn't actually exist until society invented them.
But you're a man.
Yeah.
Right? We're not talking about the broad spectrum of masculine behavior. We're talking about no one is born a man? You're not born a man? I'm not born a man?
I'm saying that, I think
we're getting silly.
Hold on here. I think it's the category of man becomes meaningless.
Does it?
Yeah, we just did this, man.
No, we didn't. At the ends of the spectrum, and I think they cross over. The male-female lines do cross over when you get to that Kenyan runner and Andy Dick.
Yeah, but I'm saying it's so broad that it becomes, to me, pretty damn meaningless.
Well, the numbers are incredibly small at those crossover marks. You're talking about a very, very small percentage of the population.
He claimed that before the cultural revolutions of the 1960s and 70s, people thought being a woman meant becoming a wife and mother, and being black meant never leading a business. His point was simple, or at least it was meant to be. Identity is nothing more than social invention. And to push it further, he added, "I was born a woman." That's what they often say, but I say, no one was born anything. It was supposed to sound profound. Instead, it sounded detached from reality. Rogan raised an eyebrow and asked the obvious. So, you don't think some people are born women? You don't think you're born a man? The professor shook his head. No. And right there, the conversation shifted.
You're making it as if it's a really common thing. When you're talking about like a small fraction of the men can't make babies. An incredibly small fraction. The vast majority of males with the XY chromosome who have penises are capable of impregnating a female with an XX chromosome.
What was framed as deep philosophy suddenly sounded like nonsense. Joe Rogan has never been one to let vague theories slide without a test, so he pressed the issue the simplest way possible. "What are you born, then?" The professor stumbled. Rogan leaned in. "Why are you a man?" The reply, "For all sorts of reasons." But none of those reasons included biology.
So there are many, many characteristics, right, that we assign to the category of man. Many of them.
Okay.
That's one characteristic. Okay? So why is that characteristic in the man category? If, in particular, that there are some men who don't share that characteristic.
But which ones don't? That's the aberration.
No chromosomes, no anatomy, no ability to reproduce. Instead, the professor insisted it was all decided by society. Rogan countered immediately.
For race, same thing happens with sickle cell anemia, right? This is what everybody invokes when they want to claim that race is real. Only black people get sickle cell anemia. Well, guess what? The numbers there are about the same as the number of men who are infertile. Why then are people with sickle cell anemia definitely black? Why is that definitely a black thing? Same thing.
Not the XY chromosome? Not the fact you have testicles? Not the fact you have a penis? Not the fact you gravitate toward boxing, kickboxing, aggressive things? The professor shook his head again. We just decided.
With humans, you're making a distinction that there are certain feelings and the way you interface with the world that may be more or less masculine or feminine.
No, but it does apply to dogs, my point here, which is that we did draw a line, right? In those, do all dogs look alike? My God, there's a huge variation there,
We're not
too.
talking about race, though. We're talking about gender, right?
But biology isn't something society decides. It's written into every cell of the body. And Rogan wasn't about to let this slide. Piece by piece, he pointed out that ignoring chromosomes, anatomy, and reproduction isn't just sloppy. It erases the foundation of how humans exist at all. In seconds, the professor's sweeping claim was already collapsing.
Well, tell me how race and gender definition.
I'm not worried about Dobermans too
especially
much.
gender definition. Let's look at gender definition and tell me how it's only bad. Why is it only bad to define men as men and women as women?
Because, well, if you say it's about making the biological claim, the biological connection there.
Rather than back down, the professor tried another tactic. He claimed that because men look and act differently from one another, because someone like Andy Dick is physically different from a fighter like Yoel Romero, the word man itself was meaningless. It was a desperate attempt to blur the category. But Rogan saw straight through it. He cut in with the simplest truth. Andy Dick may look nothing like Yoel Romero. They may have different strengths, personalities, and lifestyles. But Andy has children. He fathered them. That's straight biology. Rogan didn't need to complicate the matter with theories or abstractions. He just reminded everyone that being a man has a biological core, the ability to reproduce with a woman. Exceptions exist. Infertile men, for example. But those exceptions don't erase the category.
A guy who is born a guy who gravitates towards male activities, likes females, all those things, by saying that that's a man, that this is a born man, and you're saying, no one is.
So if you're saying if those characteristics are naturally determined, then all of us guys who don't do those things are unnatural.
Rogan explained it perfectly. Claiming infertile men erase the definition of male biology is like saying birds that can't fly prove flight has nothing to do with birds. The logic simply didn't hold, and the professor's argument looked weaker every time he tried to stretch it. With biology off the table, the professor tried another angle: race. He argued that people often use sickle cell anemia, a disease that disproportionately affects black populations, as proof that race is real. And then he tried to compare that to infertility in men. The claim was shaky from the start. Rogan calmly pointed out that sickle cell anemia is a rare condition, just like male infertility. Outliers don't erase categories. A few rare cases don't mean the larger biological truth disappears. Trying to equate rare medical exceptions to the collapse of identity itself was a stretch so thin, it tore on impact. The analogy didn't make his point stronger. It exposed how far he had to reach just to keep his argument afloat. So Rogan made things even simpler. At this point, Rogan pivoted to something undeniable: dogs. Why do we do it with animals? Isn't there a male dog and a female dog? It was the kind of question that cuts through philosophy and lands right in common sense. Everyone knows the answer: yes. Male dogs have testicles and penises. Female dogs don't. It isn't complicated, and it isn't an invention. But the professor wasn't ready to concede. He argued that even dogs being male or female was just something humans decided. Rogan pressed harder. You can't go to buy a male Doberman, get handed a female Doberman, and be told she just identifies as male. You'd say that guy's crazy, and you'd want your money back. The analogy landed with a thud on the professor's side of the table. Everyone could see the point. Categories weren't inventions. They were based on biology. The professor, realizing his position was slipping, tried once more to blur the lines. The professor shifted the discussion back to humans, claiming that behaviors and feelings were what really defined gender. But Rogan wasn't letting him off the hook. He reminded the table that most men naturally gravitate toward male-coded behaviors. They're drawn to strength, aggression, competition, and interests that have historically defined masculinity. Sure, exceptions exist. Some men aren't aggressive, some women don't want to be mothers. But exceptions don't erase categories. Rogan's calm but direct logic revealed the pattern. The professor's entire argument rested on stretching outliers into rules. And the more he did it, the weaker the whole foundation became. The final twist in the conversation came when the professor tried to connect gender to sexuality. He hinted that maybe what makes a man could depend on who he's attracted to. If a man is attracted to women, that's one thing. If he's attracted to men, maybe that shifts the category. But Rogan cut through it instantly. Sexuality doesn't erase biology. A man who is gay is still a man. His attraction doesn't alter his chromosomes, his anatomy, or his ability to father children. Rogan even made it crystal clear, gay men are still men. They can get women pregnant if they want to. They have sperm. It's not complicated. That's when the full picture came into focus. The professor wasn't proving his point. He was twisting words, blurring categories, and leaning on exceptions. Rogan, on the other hand, grounded the conversation in biology, everyday examples, and lived reality. And that contrast was impossible to miss. By the end of the exchange, Rogan didn't need to shout. He didn't need to dominate the conversation or overwhelm the professor with aggression. All he did was ask the questions anyone else in the room would have asked. He pointed to biology, chromosomes, reproduction, and everyday examples like dogs. Each time, the professor's theories cracked under the weight of reality. The debate wasn't just about gender. It was about something larger, how far modern theories can drift from basic truth, and how, when pressed with common sense, those theories often collapse. Rogan's approach revealed a bigger lesson. In a world where some try to reinvent even the most obvious realities, sometimes it only takes a simple question to bring everything back down to earth. And that's exactly what he did.